a presentation tonight just based on stress. And this is coming from about a decade's worth of experience at this point as a tutor, but also this is my research background when I was in college. I actually worked on a research team that developed the world's first stress scale, specifically designed for students, because prior to that, the stress scale that was being used in clinical settings was 100% geared towards adults. It includes questions like, how do you feel about your mortgage? How do you feel about rent? So really relevant for adults, not so much for students. So we reworked it. So I wanted to break this presentation up into 3 separate parts. The first is looking at how students individually experience stress and how it is materially different than parents. Then we're going to look at how these stress scales actually function and how you can use them for your child. And then last but not least, I have some good recommendations that hopefully aren't the same 3 or 4 recommendations that you all have heard a million times over. It's very easy for someone to say, make sure you engage in self-care, but what does that actually mean? What can we materially do to help aid our students who are struggling? As any parent here, I think, can attest to, the last 6 months especially have been incredibly stressful. And the stats even leading up to COVID were not looking so great for people experiencing stress in America. So let me pull up my slides here. Just need to share my screen. Fantastic. All right. So, present. Fantastic. All right. So just some quick notes to start things off. Even before COVID started, no one here is crazy. No one here is wrong. Stress in America is up by over 44% in the last 5 years. So that's not just 44% more people have felt that their stress levels have increased. That is, people on average have felt as if their stress levels have increased by almost half over the past 5 years. Chief concerns, as you might imagine, about money, work, the economy, the things that you probably already know about. But I think the problem that most parents wind up running into is not just that they are experiencing stress. Anybody knows that. Here is the statistical problem with adults experiencing stress, is many adults make the mistake of thinking that they are stressed, but that doesn't necessarily translate to their students. A survey found, actually a survey that I worked on, found that 69% of parents say that their stress had little to no impact on their children. 70% of parents think their stress has nothing to do with their kids. It's totally separate. Now, when we went ahead and asked students about that same question, only 14% of students agreed that their parents' stress had little or no impact on their life, right? So we have this massive gulf that once we've identified it, is much easier to work with, but we have 70% of adults saying that their stress has no impact, and only 14% of students saying that their parents' stress has no impact on them, right? So I just want to let that hang there, because I think that was maybe the, not even necessarily scariest, but the most illuminating stat, I think, that I found while on this research group, because I think parents are overly hopeful in this sense, right? It's nice to think that your stresses have no effect on your students whatsoever, but that's just not the reality of the situation, right? Stress is especially a problem for, let's say, a group of people who haven't been outside very much in the last 6 to 9 months, right? Like we all have. Over a third of young respondents felt that their stress was directly related to their eating habits, right? So if we have people who are already stressed, not exercising, so they're not getting some of the stress relief that they would otherwise get from exercise, and a third of children are self-reporting that they're eating more because of this stress, we can really easily see how this snowballing effect could happen, right? And the problem is that relationship between being stressed and being overweight is bidirectional, meaning that the more likely a student is to be stressed, the more likely they are to be overweight, and vice versa. So the sooner we can just acknowledge the fact of the situation, that parent stress and student stress are interrelated and everyone can work on it together, the sooner we can address the core issues, right? Mm-hmm. To wit, only 40% of Americans nationwide rate their health as even very good, just good or better. So we have a lot of ground to cover. Now, that's not a great stat, but we also have the fact that when we include students in that question, only 54% of people overall think that physical activity is either important or very important, right? So we have a huge uneducated base of people who understand that they are stressed, don't understand rather, that it affects their children, and have children who are not reporting that they feel as if their stress could be mediated with physical activity. So bad stats, ones that are at least easy to address, right? Nationwide, 25% of Americans feel as if they are happy with their own level of exercise. Again, not ideal. 40% of Americans report that they have spent one or more nights in the last 2 weeks lying awake. So we're not eating well, we're not exercising, we're not sleeping. So we can really easily see how all of these things are just mashing together into something that is a pretty unpleasant picture if we just sit here and try and ignore it. Thankfully, acknowledging these sorts of issues is one, not terribly difficult to do, and two, relatively easy to fix, because Americans, for all of our foibles, do have a tremendous amount of willpower, or at least feel as if we do. Over 70% of Americans feel as if they currently have the willpower in order to make things improve. So currently, that lack of willpower is a problem, but 70% of people feel as if they could engage in solutions to these problems if they felt as if it was something that they were capable of solving. So fingers crossed, hopefully some of the things that we are going to go over here can help you all out. And I will be sharing this deck with all of these stats and these bits of information because I'm a data nerd. And I think all of this is really interesting. But I think it's important to just remember that triad of if we're not eating right, we're not sleeping right, and we're not exercising, the odds that things are going to improve aren't necessarily great. But we can jump on those three things. So because I've had people ask about it a lot, I wanted to include, this is actually the adult stress scale. And what we do for adults, and you can use this on yourself to go ahead and gauge how stressed you're feeling throughout your life, and just be able to shine that light onto those stressful areas and hopefully address them. So it's just a 10-question survey, nothing else to that. And you just circle 0 if never, and 4 on the high end to very often. And then you just tabulate your score, and that's it. And so when you are grading this, I actually have the grading scale on a later slide, but the easy answer is if you are less than 1/3 of the total amount of points, then you're not very stressed. If you are in the middle third, then you are experiencing mild stress. And if you are in the upper third, then you're experiencing extreme stress. And what that says about the person that's taking this test is if you are in the moderate stress category, you have a 50% chance of developing a stress-related illness. And if you are in the major category, so the 2/3 or higher, you have an over 80% chance of having a major stress-related illness in the next 2 years. So a major stress-related illness is anything from fainting, severe mood swings, lack of sleep to the point where it is medically an issue. So I want to point this out to have a statistical backing, but also to say that no one is crazy. Like if you feel stressed and you feel as if you are having health issues, this data actually does support that. And so I think it's nice to just be able to confront the beast in a statistical way, rather than just letting everything build up and feel overwhelming. So this is the stress scale for parents. Now here, and we'll sit on this for a bit because there's a lot of information on this page. Here is the beginnings of the stress scale that we tailored towards students. We wind up with a little bit more of a succinct model in the end, but we take the power away from students just a little bit by listing things like, literally on here is just puberty. If you look in the third row on the left side, puberty is a 65-point stressor, right? And I'll go back to this in a second. Low stress is anything below 149 points. So literally just being in puberty takes you a third of the way, more than a third of the way, to developing a stress-related illness within 2 years, right? So it is not your imagination. Your child who is going through puberty is dealing with a lot, right? And so we gave that a statistical bump just to acknowledge it. Puberty, medically speaking and socially speaking, is as stressful as pregnancy, believe it or not. That is the statistical backing that we found. Puberty itself is just over half as stressful as the death of a spouse, parent, boyfriend, or girlfriend. That's how much your student is potentially going through, right? And so if we just think about the normal student with no huge apparent issues, is going through puberty, so that's 65 points, is entering college or starting junior high or high school, that's another 45 points. So we're already at 110 points. And then they are at the beginning of school, so the beginning of the school year, that's another 20 points. We're at 130 points. And they sleep less than 8 hours a night. So we're already in 155 points with the most typical New York student possible, which puts them in the mild stress category. Without any other stressors, nobody's dead or dying or in jail or having friend problems or studying too much, anything. They're already placing themselves in a category where they have a 33% chance of developing a stress-related illness. So rather than this being something that is, spooky, I just want to present this information to help parents understand that gap between the 70% of parents who feel as if their stressors don't affect their children and the 10% of students who agree with that, right? Students are dealing with a lot under the best of circumstances. And that doesn't account for anything like having trouble with your boyfriend or girlfriend, getting in an argument with your friend, having a change in financial state, work responsibilities. Anything that's on this list can materially add to their stress load, right? Even something like chronic allergies is, if you have seasonal allergies, immediately, as an additional 20 points to your stress scale. And when we're talking about having mild stress, which puts you at a pretty significant risk of developing a stress-related illness, we're already a seventh of the way there just with allergies, right? So these things are great because if you can secretly, or maybe even not so secretly, depending on your relationship with your child, if you can bring up some of these questions and try and better understand where they're at, then you may understand your student more fully. At least that's the hope, right? So what are those actual stress-related illnesses that I was talking about? So some major effects of stress include, and I'm just gonna sit on the cognitive here for a second because that's most of what I deal with in my line of work as a tutor, is the easy connection is, if a student is experiencing severe stress, basically the first thing to go is an increase in forgetfulness or problems with memory, right? An increase an increased difficulty in concentration and focus, poor judgment and decision-making, having a pessimistic outlook, increased anxiety and racing thoughts that won't go away, constant worrying, right? These are all, if I had to guess, pretty familiar symptoms that most students report to their parents as experiencing, right? And just like the triumvirate of eating, sleeping, and exercising, if we are in a situation where, due to our stress, we're experiencing heavy cognitive load and tend to be forgetful and have difficulty concentrating, well, when we go back to the scale, difficulty in school accounts for a 40-point bump in stress. That's on the left-hand side, about 7th from the bottom. That's a 40-point bump in stress. So if a student is already stressed and now all of a sudden is also unable to complete their schoolwork in the manner that they find most comfortable, now in some cases we could be adding as much as an extra quarter or more to their overall stress load, right? So, not always great news, but I think what it helps is for you to be able to better understand your students, right? That is my hope out of all this, is that if nothing else happens, that it's one fewer conversation where a parent walks away from their student, walks to the other side of the apartment and goes, what in God's name is going on, right? Hopefully we can have a little bit of statistical backing that helps parents understand what's going on. So here is the stress scale that we actually finished with. This is as short and sweet as we could possibly make it. And it also gives some pretty interesting perspectives into how adolescents experience stress. Before, we're losing a significant other, just experiencing breakup was 40 points. For adolescents, we actually put that all the way up to 74 points. We more than doubled it, right? Having problems with acne, weight, or height is 63 points, right? We bumped up the typical teenage experiences that students time and time again came to us and said were incredibly stressful, and we adjusted the scale accordingly. So what this statistical backing says is basically exactly the same as this one here. Our scales were almost identical. We tried to actually make that work. I'm going to make sure that each and every one of you gets this adolescent stress scale so that you can better understand why your student is sick, why your student is running late, how in the world they're forgetting their backpack, why it seems like they're not able to get homework done, why it seems like all of a sudden they're snapping at you out of nowhere, why there's new aches and pains that seem to be coming out of nowhere, why they're getting frequent colds that don't seem to go away, right? There's 100 different ways in which stress can manifest, but these are the primary drivers behind that stress in the first place, right? Even number 30, making new friends. Making new friends is stressful, right? And I think that's something that's easy as an adult to just not remember how much stress comes along with trying to toe the line and figure out what kind of friend this is, how you two interrelate with each other, and how this can be difficult for students of really any age. Yeah, and then last but not least, no more bad news. I'm done with bad news. We're getting to the good news. Hopefully a lot of it is some of what you already know, but I also hope that it underlines some of the important things like making sure you eat breakfast, not skipping meals, eating your fruits and veggies, getting enough iron and calcium, especially for girls, right? Making sure to drink water, not eat junk food, right? All of the things that I think most of us know at least somewhere in our minds, but I find having this basically just checklist is much more helpful than just at the end of the day. It's like 10:30 at night, you're kind of thinking about laying down to bed and you're like, did I even eat a single piece of fruit today? right?
Totally.
Not having that at your fingertips, I think can be that much more difficult. So for me, having a checklist is key. And so that's why I have this little checklist here.
So helpful. I find, you know, as a parent, it's crucial to walk the walk. You know, it's like so easy, I think, to have a lifestyle where I'm indulging in my stresses and sort of being, you know, engaging in a lot of the workload and just kind of powering through and feeling stressed and not doing anything about it. It's easy to get into that, you know, that cycle of things. So I really have to make sure that I'm modeling for the kids that I'm getting out and I'm exercising, and that I'm, you know, making it a priority to eat well, and I'm making it a game to, you know, see who can eat fruits and vegetables. And I think it starts with that leadership, really, right? And I love what you said also just about having the knowledge of what your child is going through. I think it is so easy. It's so easy to forget what that was like as an adolescent. And I think, you know, we definitely have talked about this a lot in our group of tutors, but, you know, there's a lot of assumptions that we can make about our kids and about what they're going through. So certainly like having a dialogue of, hey, what's up? You know, how's it going? Like, I noticed that you're forgetting things. I noticed that you're doing this, you know, that's called stress, right? Like that's, you know, I think you might be experiencing stress. Let's dig in and see what's going on, right? I mean, is that sort of what you would say is important? Or maybe you have a better idea.
Yeah, and to add to that, one of the biggest problems with stress is that stress causes stress hormones like cortisol to be released into the bloodstream, which unfortunately in the short term make your body feel great. I think that's one of the kind of under discussed elements of stress is stress related hormones, because they're naturally designed to utilize your fight or flight instincts. Stress in the moment as you're working with it feels incredible, right? There's that reason why everybody has the story of, you know, especially like for anyone that's gone to college, you go through college and you're up until 2 a.m. studying and you're racing to get an assignment done, and you get that assignment out the door. And for a lot of people, that's one of the best experiences they have in college. It comes up a lot in talking with parents of just like, can't believe I got it done. It was amazing. The rush I got when I finished it was incredible. That rush is from your body being flooded with stress chemicals, right? And so even that thing that we've learned to have a positive attachment towards is incredibly unhealthy, right? So I think that is a conversation that I don't think I've ever heard of a parent having with their student and one that I would love for parents to have with students more often is stress is a fuel. It's just not a clean burning fuel. And that's something that if you're not careful, can be a pretty vicious cycle.
Interesting. So like saying like, you know, you might feel that your body is doing these things, as in you might feel that it's really fantastic, or it might feel really great to be working up to the last minute, or it might feel really fantastic to stay up late and finish a paper, but actually that's normal. Your body's doing that on purpose. And is it what you're saying is it's our job as parents to point out that it's not a healthy way to conduct yourself, because even though it feels good, that's the wrong message for how you're operating. I guess I'm just kind of grappling with how you would even explain that to a kid. I don't know.
Yeah, because it's a drug. It literally is a drug. It is, your body is being pumped primarily with cortisol, but also with a whole host of other stress-related hormones that are designed to get your heart racing, to get you breathing more deeply and more quickly. So not only do you have these stress hormones that naturally make your body go into overdrive, but you're also getting a ton more oxygen, so you feel naturally very good, right? And in that moment, it does feel really good. And I think being able to have that, it's like the drug talk, right? It's if you you can have a conversation with your student where, yes, when you're an adult, sometimes you partake in alcohol. It's not a big scary thing, but you have to use it responsibly, right? In the same way, stress can be used responsibly, right? If you're just every once in a while, you're late, you need to get out the door, you need to give yourself just a swift kick in the butt, great, stress, fine. But if that's the only way you're getting your work done, which is increasingly, I think, what a lot of students wind up leaning on, you are naturally going to make yourself unhealthy. And so the first step, even before just saying, well, drink more water, right? That doesn't do anything for you if you're staying up until 2 a.m. every single day, just trying to grind out as much stress from your body as you can.
That makes really good sense to me. Thank you. I don't know if anybody else has any questions. Can you unshare your screen? I think I'm getting a weird screen thing here.
Oh, for sure.
Thanks. Yeah. So I guess, we have just a minute left or two, but I wanted just to sum up, I guess, some of this. I think it's really helpful to understand from a learning standpoint that stress will certainly interfere with a student's ability to learn well. And I think what you're describing in this feels good is important for adults to understand, because we could see a very high functioning child who's still actually functioning pretty terribly. And something I've definitely seen in your work. Yeah. Something I've seen in your work.
That was me growing up, right?
Yeah. But something I've seen in your work, maybe because you went through it yourself, but I've definitely seen you do this with students, is you definitely have a way of extracting these observations. And I really appreciate the way that you point it out to students and really dig in there when you're seeing a student who is it's another way to fall through the cracks, I think. When you say, it's totally another way to fall through the cracks, because you could really, it makes really good sense. I'm really glad.
It's easy to say that, it's easy to say that, well, the assignments are getting turned in, so why should I worry? Right. And that was my scholastic story until I got to college. It was just, no one knew how I got it done, but I got it done. And as far as anyone was concerned, that was the end of the story. Right. But it was not creating a healthy cycle. Right. So I like to get that gospel out there as much as I can.
Yeah. So let's leave it at that. I think the point of that we'll all leave you with just to ponder is that we think it's worth it to investigate how your student is actually working through their work, and to take tonight's webinar. If you didn't catch the whole thing, it'll be available in full on our YouTube channel. And we're happy to certainly speak with any families who are interested in talking about this. But I think it's really important to dig in and make sure that our students are being attended to in ways that are sometimes not super clear to us. And I thank you, Spencer, for bringing to light so much important information for us. Yeah, thank you. All right, thanks, everybody.
Happy to do it.
Any closing remarks, Spencer, on your end?
Statistically, teenagers going through a breakup is emotionally the same level of discomfort as adults going through a divorce. Right. So stress.
Yes, stress.
It's important to keep in mind that your students are experiencing some pretty wild mood changes, and to be there to support them.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for attending.
That's it. That's all. Good night, everybody.
Good night.